fire hummed softly inside the old stone hearth, casting warm orange halos across the wooden cabin's walls. Snow drifted like feathers outside the frost-veiled window, each flake sliding gently down the glass and vanishing into the night. Inside, all was stillness, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the faint hum of the vintage radio resting on a nearby wooden table. The air smelled faintly of pine, old paper, and the soothing comfort of a fresh cup of tea. Professor Walter Gray settled deeper into his cushioned chaise, his cardigan drawn snugly around his shoulders. Beside him, the small black cat curled into a perfect circle, its slow breathing rising and falling like the tide. Walter adjusted his round spectacles and opened a worn leather book resting on his lap. Its spine creaked, releasing a whisper of ancient pages and forgotten tales into the cozy air. He looked up at the snow for a long moment, then spoke in the calm, warm tone of a man who had lived many winters and cherished every story they carried. "Tonight," he began softly, "I want to tell you about a world that may have existed, or may have lived only in the dreams of ancient storytellers." He traced the faded letters on the book's cover. "A world called Atlantis." The radio glowed with a gentle amber pulse. As though listening, Walter continued in a voice that flowed like a quiet river. "For over 2,000 years, Atlantis has haunted our imagination, a place of extraordinary beauty, wisdom, power, and tragedy, a civilization said to rival all others, lost in a single night to the sea." He looked down at the cat, who flicked its ear in dreamy acknowledgement. "But before we speak of its fall," Walter murmured, "we must imagine its beginning." The firelight shimmered as he turned the page. "Long ago, in a time before recorded maps, ancient Greek philosophers spoke of an island far beyond the known world. Plato, the great thinker of Athens, claimed the story came from Egypt, passed to Solon, passed to Critias, and then to him. And according to his words, Atlantis was a mighty empire, blessed by the gods, rich in resources beyond imagination. His voice grew softer, gentler, temples adorned with gold and silver, gardens bursting with fruits unknown to mainland soil, grand canals gliding through the city like ribbons of glass. And at the center, a palace said to shine brighter than the sun. Walter smiled faintly, imagining it himself. It was a place of harmony and prosperity, a place where wisdom guided ambition, a place that, if it truly existed, represented the very peak of human achievement. He let the image linger before drifting onward. But as with all great legends, beauty was only the beginning. Outside the window, snow continued to fall in a silent dance. Walter's voice lowered to a soft, hypnotic murmur. "The Atlanteans grew proud," he said. "Too proud. Wealth and knowledge gave way to ambition. Ambition gave way to conquest. And conquest gave rise to arrogance." The fire crackled, the sound punctuating his words like gentle footnotes of flame. "Plato tells us that the Atlanteans lost sight of the virtues that had made them great. Their hearts darkened, their power became their obsession. And so, in the eyes of the gods, Atlantis no longer deserved the favor it had been given." Walter brushed ash from the edge of his book. "Then came the night the sea rose." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle like a blanket of snow. A single night, a single storm, a single rage of earth and ocean, and Atlantis, the great empire, vanished beneath the waves, swallowed whole. The radio hummed softly, its glow steady, calm. "But," Walter said, lifting a finger, "not all who heard this story believed it to be literal. Many saw it as a warning, a moral tale of what happens when knowledge grows faster than wisdom." He leaned back into his chaise, his voice barely above a whisper. "And yet, Even now, thousands of years later, we still search. He turned toward the window again, watching the snow swirl in the golden lamplight. It is human nature, he said gently, to seek what is lost, to imagine what might have been, to find echoes of forgotten worlds hidden in our own. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. Perhaps Atlantis was real, he murmured. Perhaps it was not. But the story holds a truth deeper than any ocean. Walter lifted the book again, turning to another aged page filled with hand-drawn maps. Let us travel now, he whispered. Across oceans, across centuries, across dreams, to imagine Atlantis as it might have been. Before pride pulled it under, the cabin grew even quieter, as though the snow itself paused to listen. Walter's voice softened until it became a lullaby woven from ancient salt and sun. Imagine an island, he said, rising from the sea like a jewel, its mountains tall and proud, their peaks brushed with white, its rivers bright as polished glass, winding through fields of green. Imagine cities built of marble and colored stone, their streets lined with trees, their fountains carved with symbols older than memory. The fire swayed, shadows dancing gently across the professor's face. At the heart of the island stood the Temple of Poseidon. Walter continued, a place of shimmering silver walls, a roof made of ivory, and statues so perfect they seemed alive. Here the Atlanteans paid homage to the sea that had blessed their shores. His tone deepened, though remained soft, and they built rings of land and water around their capital, beautiful concentric circles, crafted with such precision and grace that they were said to reflect the celestial motions of the heavens. Walter let out a quiet breath. They were masters of art, science, engineering, astronomy. They studied the stars. They mastered metalwork. Their ships sailed farther than any others of their time. He lowered his gaze, eyes thoughtful. And yet, with all their knowledge, they could not predict their own downfall. He closed the book softly. That, he whispered, is where our journey truly begins. The cat lifted its head sleepily, as though sensing the shift in the story's tide. Walter placed his hand on the book, his voice becoming even more soothing. For tonight, he murmured, we will walk the shining streets of Atlantis. We will listen to its people. We will witness the empire at its height, and feel the tremors of the tragedy that awaited. The fire dimmed slightly, and perhaps, Walter said gently, in its story we will find a reflection of our own. Snow whispered against the window. The radio glowed like a quiet heartbeat. The cabin breathed in warmth and silence. Now, Walter whispered, let the tale carry you to the place where myth meets memory, where history sleeps beneath the sea. He smiled softly, turning the page again. And so we begin. Far beyond the Mediterranean, past the pillars of Heracles where ancient sailors feared the world might end. The ocean stretched endlessly, vast, mysterious, and filled with secrets whispered only to the wind. It was here, according to the legends, that Atlantis once rose from the water like a dream sculpted into reality, and on nights when the moon shimmered across the waves, some claimed the sea still remembered. Professor Walter Gray's voice carried gently through the quiet cabin, wrapping the listener in warmth as he continued his tale. Imagine, he murmured, the first glimpse of Atlantis as a traveler approached by sea. The fire crackled softly as the story unfolded. The sun would rise behind the mountains, casting pale gold across the shoreline. High cliffs embraced the harbor, their faces veined with minerals that sparkled like jewels. Ships from distant lands approached slowly, not simply out of caution, but out of reverence. For Atlantis was not merely a destination, it was a marvel. Walter adjusted his glasses, Eyes glowing softly in the firelight, the capital sat at the center of 3 concentric rings of land and sea, an engineering wonder unmatched even by the greatest cities of later ages. Bridges arched gracefully between the rings, their white stone reflecting the morning light. Waterways flowed through the city like silver threads, guiding traders and scholars to its heart. He smiled faintly. Here, knowledge was as precious as gold. Libraries, observatories, academies. Atlantis welcomed all who wished to learn. They believed the universe was a puzzle waiting to be understood, and every discovery was a step toward harmony between humanity and the cosmos. Outside the cabin window, the snowfall thickened, drifting silently across the dark sky. The world felt suspended, timeless, as though the listener truly drifted across ancient seas toward a forgotten world. In the harbor, Walter continued. Merchant ships from Egypt, Phoenicia, and lands now lost to history unloaded goods, spices, scrolls, gems, curious instruments. Yet the Atlanteans were just as eager to offer their own creations in trade, tools forged from rare metals, maps that stretched beyond the known world, medicines derived from plants that grew only on their island. He lifted the book slightly, revealing a hand-drawn map inside. At the heart of the capital stood the Grand Palace District, where the royal bloodline traced its heritage to Poseidon himself. The palace was said to be vast beyond imagination, its walls adorned with gold, its floors laid with orichalcum, a metal described as shining brighter than fire. Some believed it glowed at night, casting a faint, warm light across the city as though the gods themselves walked its halls. The black cat shifted slightly, curling closer to Walter's warmth. The professor's voice softened even more. But what truly made Atlantis extraordinary was not its wealth, or its beauty, or its power, but its spirit. The people valued wisdom. They understood balance. They sought harmony with nature, believing their prosperity came not from conquering the world, but from understanding it. He paused, letting the fire pop quietly. Yet harmony, like all delicate things, can be easily disturbed. The story drifted deeper, like a tide carrying the listener softly away. The first signs of change were subtle, Walter said, barely noticeable to those who lived within the Empire's golden age. A shift in ambition, a hunger for expansion, a growing belief that Atlantis, being blessed by the gods, was destined to rule not just its island, but the world beyond. He leaned back slightly, his voice becoming a warm whisper. Some scholars warned of danger. They argued that greatness grows best when nurtured, not seized. But others, warriors, politicians, those who saw opportunity, spoke louder. He sighed quietly. And so, the Atlanteans began to build fleets not for exploration, but for conquest. Outside the cabin, the snowflakes glided past the window in slow, delicate spirals. Still, Walter continued. Atlantis did not fall in war. No invading army breached its walls. No rival empire crushed its spirit. Instead, it was the island itself that turned against them. A faint creak from the cabin's wooden beams echoed as though agreeing with the truth of the tale. For every legend holds a kernel of warning. Walter said softly, the Atlanteans forgot the balance between human ambition and the natural world. They dug too deep into the earth. They built massive structures along fault lines. They expanded their city beyond the stable land their ancestors once honored. His voice lowered to a gentle murmur, and slowly, the island began to tremble. In the capital, at the Grand Temple of Poseidon, the high priest sensed the change first. They watched the sea with unease. Tides grew unpredictable. Storms gathered more fiercely. Birds migrated in unusual patterns. Fishermen spoke of strange rumblings beneath the water. deep, distant, like a slumbering giant stirring in its sleep. But the rulers of Atlantis, confident in their mastery of the world, dismissed the signs. Meanwhile, deep below the surface, the earth strained beneath centuries of construction and imbalance. Once stable land shifted, caverns cracked, hot magma surged beneath the crust. The sea, sensitive to every movement, began to withdraw from the shore at unexpected hours, only to rush back with alarming force. Walter turned his head slightly, listening to the wind outside as if hearing the echoes of ancient waves. And then, he whispered, "The night arrived, the night spoken of in Plato's ancient dialogues, the night when the sea rose." He looked down at the cat, who blinked slowly, half awake. The ground split, bridges cracked, water surged through the canals with impossible force, and on the horizon, something stirred. A great wave, rising higher than any wave the island had ever seen. He exhaled softly, letting the weight of the moment sink in like a deep ocean swell. Some tried to flee, some prayed, some stood frozen in disbelief. But the wave did not hesitate. It approached silently at first, a dark curve against the moonlit sea, and when it struck, Walter whispered, it swallowed the city whole. The fire flickered low, its glow warm and steady. Houses vanished in a heartbeat, towers toppled, marble shattered. The great temple of Poseidon, once the pride of Atlantis, buckled beneath the force of the ocean and collapsed into the churning depths. Snow tapped softly against the cabin window. In the span of a single night, Walter continued, the island that had stood for centuries, perhaps millennia, was gone. He closed the book gently. And where it once was, he murmured, only the silent sea remained. The cabin breathed quietly, the fire casting long, soothing shadows across the walls. The story lingered in the air like a soft echo. But legends, Walter said after a pause, do not vanish as easily as cities. He opened his eyes, warm and thoughtful. For thousands of years, people have searched for Atlantis. Some claim it lies beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Others believe it can be found near Greece, Spain, Africa, or even Antarctica. And though we may never find its exact place, he smiled faintly, the search itself has meaning. The radio hummed softly, glowing like a small beacon in the dim room. For the legend of Atlantis, Walter whispered, reminds us that even the greatest civilizations can forget their humility, that nature, patient but powerful, always reclaims what is out of balance, and that wisdom, true wisdom, must walk gently beside ambition. He shifted on the chaise, the cat stretching contentedly. And so, he said softly, our journey continues. The sea that swallowed Atlantis did not roar with triumph. It simply closed over the ruins, folding them into its vast blue silence, as though tucking away a forgotten dream. And for a long time, years, centuries, perhaps longer, the ocean kept its secret well. No ship passed above the sunken land without feeling an inexplicable stillness. No fisherman cast a net nearby without sensing a faint tremor in the deep. The world moved onward, unaware that beneath the waves lay the fading memory of a civilization, once greater than any other. Back in the warm glow of the cabin, Professor Walter Gray turned a page slowly, the delicate paper rasping softly under his fingers. Snow glided down the window in thin silver ribbons, and the fire murmured in the hearth. The black cat shifted on his lap, its soft purring blending with the gentle hum of the vintage radio. Walter's voice returned in a low, soothing cadence. Most stories would end there, he said, with the fall of Atlantis, swallowed by the sea and lost to time. But the legend didn't end. It lingered, whispering across the ages. He rested his hand on the cat's back, stroking gently. "You see," he continued, "in every generation, someone asked the same question. Was it real? And every time that question was asked, Atlantis drifted a little closer to the surface, not of the sea, but of our imagination. Outside, the winter night deepened, yet the cabin felt timeless. Let us journey now," Walter said, "through the echoes of history, where the memory of Atlantis surfaced again and again, sometimes as myth, sometimes as hope, sometimes as warning." He gazed into the fire, as though watching centuries unfold within the flames. In ancient Egypt, priests of Sais spoke of an island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a land rich in wisdom, destroyed by water. They claimed their oldest scrolls held the tale long before Greek philosophers ever heard it. To them, Atlantis was not a fantasy, but history. Walter adjusted his cardigan, gathering warmth into his voice. Later, Greek scholars debated the story in bustling marketplaces and quiet academic halls. Some believed Plato's tale was metaphor, meant to teach virtue. Others insisted it described a real event, an echo of a natural disaster remembered across generations. A soft smile touched his lips, and then came the dreamers, the adventurers, the sailors who claimed their ancestors spoke of an island that vanished. They told of strange ruins beneath shallow waters, of cities glimpsed in rippling moonlight, of the sea whispering stories no human should understand. He paused, letting the moment breathe. But it wasn't until many centuries later, Walter continued, that the search began in earnest. He leaned back, settling into the chaise. In the era of great exploration, when Europe stretched its sails across the world, Atlantis resurfaced as a tantalizing possibility. Explorers who crossed the Atlantic returned with tales of lands untouched by known civilizations. Some whispered that Atlantis lay there, somewhere among the islands that dotted the Caribbean. The cat flicked its tail, almost as if reacting to the shifting tide of the story. But as our maps grew more complete, Walter said gently, the mystery deepened rather than faded. For the more we learned about our world, the harder Atlantis became to place. He let out a slow breath. Some proposed the island lay near Spain, submerged near the Straits of Gibraltar. Others believed ancient Minoan ruins on the island of Crete were the remnants of Atlantis, destroyed by volcanic fury. And many scholars pointed to Santorini, whose eruption around 1600 BCE was so catastrophic it reshaped entire coastlines. The fire crackled, breathing warmth into the cabin. And then there was the wild theory, Walter said softly with a touch of amusement, that Atlantis lies hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica, its people swallowed not by the sea, but by a slow, relentless freeze. Snow tapped softly on the window pane, as if knocking from the outside world. Yet, Walter whispered, for every clue that surfaced, the truth remained elusive. Atlantis became not just a place, but a symbol for all the civilizations we have lost. He turned the page again, revealing an illustration of ruins drenched in deep ocean blue. Consider this, he murmured. Throughout human history, countless cultures have risen to greatness. Some flourished for centuries, building cities of incredible beauty. Others crafted technologies far ahead of their time. Yet nearly all of them vanished. He traced a finger slowly along the drawing. Göbekli Tepe, the Indus Valley, the Minoans, the Maya, Egypt's first dynasty, kingdoms along the Nile long forgotten, civilizations in the Amazon swallowed by jungle, cities beneath the sands of Arabia, stone circles in Britain whose purpose is still debated. Walter's voice softened to a hush. The world we know today is only the most recent chapter in a book filled with lost pages. He closed the book gently, allowing the idea to settle, and Atlantis became the symbol of all those missing chapters, a reminder that the world we live in now was built upon the ruins of worlds before it. The radio glowed softly, filling the quiet room with a peaceful amber pulse. Walter adjusted his glasses, looking at the window as if he could see through the falling snow into the deep ocean beyond. Now, he continued, let us return to the island itself, not as a ruin beneath the waves, but as a memory carried through time. He leaned forward slightly. Imagine a world beyond the reach of our maps, where the sea is calm and the horizon never quite settles. Imagine sailing across the water and seeing shapes below. Shapes that move not like fish or coral, but like walls, streets, gates, structures of a forgotten age. His voice flowed like a gentle tide. Many divers have claimed to see such things. Some speak of pillars rising from the seabed. Others describe roads paved with stone. Most of these tales are illusions, light playing tricks on the ocean floor. But some, the rare few, linger with a sense of possibility. Walter whispered, what if Atlantis is not one place, but many? What if its story echoes through every lost civilization, every vanished city, every forgotten people? He smiled softly, for in the end, the legend's power is not in proving it real or disproving it. This power is in the conversation it keeps alive. The cat stretched and nestled even closer into Walter's lap, as though lulled by the soft rising and falling of his voice. But let us drift deeper still, Walter said, into the last moments of Atlantis, not the destruction described by Plato, but the memory of its people. He closed his eyes briefly, imagining the ancient world. As the earth trembled and the seas rose, imagine the confusion that swept through the shining streets, the people running to the higher terraces, the priests gathering in the temple of Poseidon, the scholars clutching their scrolls, mothers holding their children, fishermen staring helplessly at the waves. Walter's voice was slow, tender, mournful. They did not know they were living their final moments. Most great tragedies begin quietly, without warning. He breathed in deeply. Imagine fathers calling out names drowned by thunder. Imagine the palace columns shaking as the sea crashed through the lower gates. Imagine the bright canals turning dark with silt and debris. His voice lowered to a hush. And then the moment when the island itself gave way. The cabin grew still. The cliffs fractured. The mountains groaned. Entire districts slipped beneath the water as though swallowed by the earth herself. Walter opened his eyes again, glowing warmly in the firelight. And yet, in that final moment, imagine one person standing at the summit of a great tower. Someone who turned their eyes not toward the destruction, but toward the stars. He smiled faintly. For the Atlanteans, it was said the stars guided everything. Seasons, tides, destiny. Perhaps in their final breath, someone looked upward and whispered a prayer not for survival, but for remembrance. He ran a gentle hand across the book on his lap, and that prayer carried on the wind. Maybe why we still speak of them today. The radio hummed in agreement. For if Atlantis truly vanished, Walter said softly, it left behind no ruins, only a story. And sometimes, a story is enough. He leaned deeper into the chaise, cozy and warm. Now, he whispered, let us drift once more across the sea, toward the echoes that remain. The sea has a memory, though it never speaks of it aloud. It carries the whispers of storms, the secrets of drowned coastlines, and the faintest echoes of civilizations that slipped beneath its surface long before our time. Long after Atlantis vanished, its presence remained, not in sight, but in the subtle language of waves and tides, in the stories carried from shore to shore by sailors who swore they felt something stirring in the deep. Professor Walter Gray turned another page of his old leather book, the gentle glow of the fire outlining his thoughtful expression. The black cat purred softly in his lap, its rhythmic breathing blending with the steady hum of the vintage radio. Snow continued to drift outside the cabin window in slow, peaceful spirals. Ever since Atlantis disappeared, Walter murmured, the world has been searching for it. Not always consciously, but in the quiet moments of wonder, in the feeling that somewhere out there lies a truth we have not yet discovered. He rested his hand lightly on the warm fur of the cat. Consider the early travelers, he continued, his voice smooth and calm. Those brave souls who set sail into waters no one had mapped. Some returned with tales of islands that appeared then vanished. Others spoke of underwater ruins glimpsed in clear, shallow seas. Columns and stones arranged too deliberately to be the work of nature alone. The fire popped softly, and still others, those who sailed by night, described lights flickering beneath the waves, as though torches carried by unseen hands moved through forgotten streets. Most dismissed these stories as illusions, tricks of moonlight and imagination, but legends are built on such fragments. He closed the book momentarily, letting his gaze drift toward the snowy window. In fact, he said gently, Atlantis became part of a larger question, one that humanity has asked since the beginning. What came before us? What civilizations rose, thrived, and vanished before our earliest written records? What secrets lie buried not just beneath the sea, but beneath the sands, the jungles, the mountains? He tapped a finger softly against the old wooden table beside him. Look to Egypt, he said. The Great Sphinx bears erosion patterns that some scholars believe point to rainfall thousands of years older than the traditional dates suggest. Look to the pyramids of the Americas, structures whose origins are still debated. Look to stone megaliths scattered across the world, their purpose and creators shrouded in mystery. The cat shifted again, and Walter gently adjusted his arm, so the creature could settle more comfortably. Each of these places, he continued, whispers of a world older than we imagine, and Atlantis, whether real or myth, stands atop them all as a symbol of everything lost, and everything waiting to be rediscovered. He opened the book once more, revealing an illustration of ancient navigators studying the stars. For the Atlanteans, Walter said, if Plato's tale reflects even a sliver of truth, the stars were their companions. Navigation, architecture, agriculture, even their rituals were aligned with celestial movement. The night sky was their map and their teacher. He smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why the memory of Atlantis refused to fade. For as long as we look upward into the night and feel that spark of curiosity, the same spark that once lit their paths, we keep their story alive. He paused and gathered a breath, as though preparing to dive deeper into the tale. Let us imagine now, he said softly, those who survived. The fire's glow softened, and snow gently brushed the window. Plato's account tells us Atlantis was destroyed in a single night, Walter murmured. But history is rarely so precise. It is possible, as many have speculated, that some Atlanteans escaped the catastrophe. Perhaps they fled in ships before the final wave struck. Perhaps they carried with them fragments of knowledge, stories, tools, ways of thinking, that later appeared in distant cultures. Walter traced a finger along the edge of the page. In Egypt, for instance, ancient priests claimed their ancestors received knowledge from a mysterious people who came from the west, across the sea. In Central America, Mayan legends describe wise visitors who taught astronomy and architecture, only to vanish again into the ocean. Even in Greece, The earliest myths speak of strangers who brought gifts of understanding. His voice lowered, becoming a gentle murmur. Are these merely coincidences? Or echoes of a people whose home no longer existed on any map? He leaned back. Imagine a small group of survivors, sailing under a sky filled with stars. Guided by constellations they knew well, they would have felt sorrow beyond words as they watched the horizon swallow the place of their birth. Everything familiar, everything cherished, taken in a single night. He exhaled softly, but perhaps, in their grief, they carried hope with them. A hope that the wisdom of Atlantis would live on. Woven into the cultures they touched, the radio glowed faintly, its light pulsing in slow, calming intervals. And so, Walter said, the legend grew, not because the island remained, but because its memory became a seed planted in distant lands. He flipped to another page, this one showing ancient ruins intertwined with vines and coral. In the centuries that followed, explorers encountered strange stone structures beneath shallow waters near Greece, Spain, and even Japan. Each time speculation rose. Is this Atlantis? Sometimes scholars dismissed the claims. Other times, the findings deepened the mystery. He chuckled softly. Why? Because the ocean is a difficult keeper of secrets. It reveals just enough to entice us, and hides the rest behind blue silence. The cabin's warmth spread softly into the room. Then came the scientists, Walter continued. Those who study geology, climate patterns, tectonic shifts. They found evidence that entire coastlines have risen and fallen countless times. That earthquakes and tsunamis have erased cities in mere minutes. That islands have appeared and disappeared as the Earth's crust shifted. He paused thoughtfully, and suddenly, the idea of a great island sinking did not seem quite as impossible. The fire crackled again, illuminating the professor's serene face. But whether Atlantis was a real empire, a memory of an older civilization, or a story crafted to teach virtue, it became something far greater than its origin. Walter rested his book gently on the table. It became a mirror. He folded his hands. In Atlantis, we see the best of ourselves. Our creativity, our curiosity, our ingenuity. But we also see our greatest danger, our tendency to let ambition overshadow wisdom. The cat breathed softly, curled like a comma beside Walter. And so, the professor whispered, Atlantis became a warning passed down through ages. A reminder that even the greatest civilizations can fall if they lose sight of what matters most. Snow tapped softly against the window once more, like fingers writing a message in the night. Yet, Walter added gently, Atlantis is also a beacon of hope, for lost worlds inspire us. They remind us to keep searching, keep learning, keep imagining. He leaned his head back slightly. And above all, they remind us that the ocean of history is far deeper than any one lifetime can explore. The fire dimmed as if preparing for the story's next tide. Let us go now, Walter whispered, to the final echoes of Atlantis, where myth, memory, and meaning drift together like currents beneath the sea. Morning was beginning to unfold beyond the cabin window. Though the world remained wrapped in winter's calm silence, the snowfall had softened into a light drift, flakes floating like tiny pieces of memory settling on the earth. Inside, the fire had mellowed to a gentle glow, casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards. The vintage radio hummed a faint, steady tone, and the black cat stretched lazily before curling once more against Professor Walter Gray's side. Walter adjusted his spectacles and inhaled the peaceful air of the cabin. When he spoke again, his voice was a soft thread woven from warmth, wisdom, and the faint ache of ancient longing. Before our journey ends tonight, he murmured, We must speak of why Atlantis stayed with us all these centuries. Why this single story, this single night, has lasted longer than the greatest empires. He leaned back on the chaise, fingers resting lightly on the cover of his book. You see, Atlantis is not merely a place, he whispered. It is an idea, a reflection, a question that humanity asks again and again. The fire crackled quietly, placing one hand gently on the cat's back. Walter continued, for some, Atlantis is a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can fall if they stray too far from virtue. For others, it represents a golden age, proof that humanity once touched greatness beyond what we can imagine. The cat stretched, then melted back into stillness as Walter's tone softened even more. And for many, the professor continued, Atlantis is simply hope. Hope that there were once worlds filled with wonders we have not yet rediscovered. And that perhaps, in time, we might find them again. He brushed his fingers along the rim of his teacup, feeling its warmth. But the true essence of Atlantis lies deeper still. He paused, letting the silence breathe. It is the reminder, he whispered, that knowledge is precious, that balance is fragile, and that curiosity, our constant reaching into the unknown, is what keeps the human spirit alive. Walter opened his old leather book to a page displaying a faded sketch. A city rising from the sea like a vision of light. He traced the lines with tender precision. In the ancient world, he said softly, stories were not meant simply to record events. They were meant to guide. Plato did not give us Atlantis to obsess over its location, but to help us look inward, to ask ourselves, what kind of world are we building? Are we walking toward harmony, or toward hubris? He lifted his gaze toward the warmly glowing fire. The Atlanteans in the tale lost themselves. Their ambition outpaced their wisdom, and when the balance broke, so too did their world. Walter's voice dipped to a soft murmur, like ocean waves brushing against the hull of a quiet ship. But here is the gentler truth that so many forget. Atlantis did not disappear to punish humanity. It disappeared to teach. He breathed deeply, to teach that our choices matter, that our dreams must be tended carefully, that even the mightiest empires, even ours, can crumble if we lose sight of what makes us human. The radio's amber dial glowed brighter for a moment, as though agreeing. And yet, Walter whispered, Atlantis teaches hope as well, for if a civilization of such brilliance once existed, real or imagined, then perhaps humanity can rise to such heights again. Perhaps the wisdom they carried, the harmony they once cherished, can still be found, if we choose to seek it. Outside, the snowfall thinned, letting a faint morning light seep into the cabin. Walter turned another page, revealing a drawing of concentric rings. Atlantis in its legendary form, its design echoing the cosmos. What if, he murmured, the story of Atlantis was meant to remind us that progress is not measured by power, but by balance, that true greatness lies not in what we build, but in how we live within the world we build. He smiled gently, his voice as soft as the snow. Perhaps Atlantis was not a warning at all. Perhaps it was an invitation. The cat's ear twitched. An invitation to imagine a better world, Walter said, and to remember that the line between creation and destruction is as thin as a ripple on the sea. He placed the book softly on his lap. Let us drift now, he said, to the final image of Atlantis, not its destruction but its legacy. He closed his eyes, painting the picture with words alone. Imagine the sea glowing under a moonlit sky. Beneath the surface, shadows of ancient walls rest quietly, their stories sleeping in coral and sand. And though no footsteps echo through those streets, the memory of life remains, a whisper of music, a flicker of golden light, a heartbeat in the deep, the fire dimmed into a calm, rhythmic flicker. Atlantis may lie at the bottom of the ocean, Walter murmured, but its spirit rises every time someone wonders, every time someone searches, every time someone believes that there was once a civilization so elegant, so wise, so harmonious, that the world could not forget it. He stroked the cat gently, and perhaps, he added, the world will one day uncover a fragment, an artifact, a wall, a sunrise-lit stone, that reveals the truth. He opened his eyes, warm and thoughtful. But even if we never find the island itself, we have already found the lesson. Walter leaned forward slightly, his voice becoming even softer, like the last line of a lullaby. The lesson that the rise of a great civilization depends on how deeply it values wisdom, that the fall of a civilization begins when that wisdom is forgotten, and that as long as we remember the story of Atlantis, the wisdom does not drown. Outside, the snowfall stopped completely, leaving the world coated in peaceful white. Walter Gray closed his old book with care. And so, he whispered, as the night fades and you drift toward sleep, know this, Atlantis is not lost. It lives in every dream of a better future, in every question we ask, in every mystery we choose to explore. He smiled softly, the fire reflecting in his glasses. It lives here, tonight, in this story we share. The cabin grew quiet. The radio glowed faintly. The fire warmed the air like a gentle embrace. Walter's voice faded into a final whisper. So rest well, dear traveler. Let the ocean carry your thoughts to peaceful places. And may your dreams be filled with the light of worlds that still wait to be discovered. He reached down, giving the cat a final affectionate touch. Good night, from me and from Atlantis. And with that, the story settled into the stillness of the cabin, soft, warm, eternal, like a distant city resting beneath the sea.